Hello and welcome to Race Streamer. In this episode, we are at Lydd, which is on the south coast of Kent. And first thing that needs to be said about Lydd for me is I had a really hard time here last year. That's not because of any bad races or anything like what happened at Bayford Meadows, thankfully. It was just because it's such a physical circuit. It's properly quick. The curbs are mahoosive, so found it pretty tough last time I was out, and it's fair to say I've still found it pretty tough on this day, even though I've been doing a lot of training. But anyways, the sun is shining, there's no threat of rain like there was when I was here last year, and this is rolling into Heat 1, where this is the worst grid start that I had of the day, starting down in 9th. It's worth saying as well that the fields weren't as big at Lydd. I guess that's because a lot of the northern folk, they don't come down for this one because it's so far away from them. So yeah, as usual, priority just trying to keep it clean through the first few corners. I feel like I'm sort of regurgitating the same stuff now, but it's everyone's priority at the beginning of every race, hopefully, is to possibly make positions, but ultimately just not get tangled up and lose loads of ground. So I've lost a position in total. Anthony Amato's up my inside at the moment. Unfortunately decides that I don't exist and turns in on me there, and that means that I lose further ground to another driver who's about to overtake me on the inside, which is Mr. Steve Brown. So in my head at the moment, I know that I'm following Steve. I'm not really too fussed about trying to overtake him back, to be honest, because I'm assuming that he's going to have good pace on some of the drivers ahead. As you can see, already being pretty aggressive trying to get past Anthony there. So for me, it was about hoping that Steve was going to pick off some of the drivers ahead, and I would pick up the scraps and try and overtake them once Steve was done with them, and that is exactly what happens here. So Anthony not giving Steve quite enough space and therefore compromising his run through the long left-hander, and I mugs him. Now I thought I'd go quiet there for a sec so you could hear what happened to my kart engine, and you could see how much I closed onto the back of Steve at the end of the straight there. So I had an absolute rocket of a weapon of the kart on me in this race, and I didn't know how to deal with it, genuinely. This really trips me up through this whole race, because sometimes it was like the kart found an extra rev band up the top at the end of the straight, and it meant that I arrived at the last corner so much quicker. So yeah, I just screwed up my braking for the entire day. Managed to get through on the inside of Tom Fuller there. Thankfully he gave me space, so it meant that we both didn't lose too much time, and ultimately I got through on him. Yeah, so you could hear it again there with the kart engine, and you can see I was just leaving my braking a little bit too late and don't carry anywhere as much speed out of the second apex as I could have done compared with Steve ahead anyway. So main priority now was just trying to stay on the back of Steve, hopefully hunt down the drivers ahead, knowing that I was still firmly plunged down the back of the field. So Lydd is very much a momentum circuit. I mean, you could argue that with all of them, but because it's so fast and flowing, if you overtake at Lydd and you make a bit of a mare of it, then you lose so much ground to the karts behind, because the average speed is so big here. So from that point of view, there aren't generally any really big gainers at Lydd in terms of gaining positions, but you can certainly lose a lot. Like I would have done there by clipping the inside. You know what? I don't know what that is. It's not a curb. It's like some sort of plastic barrier to hold the turf up there. But anyway, yeah, don't touch that with your inside wheel. It really unsettles the cars. And also, don't lump that massive hole that I just went over as well. All of the track tips coming from you from the way to not do things currently. So pretty uneventful most of the race followed after that. Steve ditched me because I didn't have the pace to keep up on a consistent basis. You can see me compromising my run through the middle of the long left-hander there. And this means that we're going to be vulnerable to an overtake from a driver behind, who I think is Anthony Amato. Yep. So unfortunately letting him get back through on me there, and with a lap to try and catch back up and overtake him again. Now, the curbs are a funny one at Lydd, I have to say. I mean, they're super uncomfortable. I know we don't go racing for the comfort factor, but it has to be said that the curbs at Lydd really chuck you about as it goes, so I could never really find the consistency through the first couple of corners, but finding that I had a lot more pace than Anthony through the, the third corner? Fifth corner, I suppose. Now, the long left-hander is a funny one, actually. I've heard people talking about double pedalling there, i.e. riding the brake pedal to try and keep the revs up, so I was trying to do that in this race, but not pulling it off extremely well. Managing to get a better run out of the corner than Anthony, but ultimately it was too little too late, so starting 9th, finishing in 10th. I enjoyed this race, it just didn't turn out fantastically. And I really enjoyed my kart because it was a total rocket. It was a bit sad that I couldn't make the most of it, but honestly it just caught me out the way that it suddenly caught on power at the end of the straight on some laps. It didn't happen every lap, but hey ho, on to the next race. Now this is a site I like having. Not having any drivers in front, so knowing that I'm not going to have to deal with any chaos at least happening in front of me at the beginning of a race. Starting in 2nd place with Anthony Amato alongside, and then the top half of the field behind us is Rob Langthorpe, James Wattis, Rhiannon Percox, Ollie Flashman, Reese Pope, Stephen Westford, and that covers quite a field of decent drivers behind me. Obviously the Class 3s are at the back of the field as usual, but there's a lot of Class 1s in this one, so I knew I was going to have a tough time holding on to 2nd, but I knew, again, it's a momentum circuit, so from that point of view, just trying to keep position and get in people's way, basically. Getting a really good run on Anthony at the start. Unfortunately, he gets a little bit of a better run around the outside. I made sure to try and give him space, even though we touched a little bit, but it was nothing malicious. James Wattis coming flying up the inside, getting a bit of a better drive out of there as well, so dropped down to 3rd place already, but in the grand scheme of things, not too worried. I'm still very close to the back of James here. I know he's putting his finger up like, come and follow me. I wasn't really thinking of taking him back unless he was going to make a mistake, to be honest. Like, it's not a long race, it's 10 laps, but I just wanted to try and stay in touching distance of the leaders and maybe gap a few drivers behind if that was possible. Clearly James has got the lead on his mind though, as he goes and takes it, so this leaves Anthony Amato in front of me. Again, not too worried about going for an overtake anytime soon. Noticing that I had a decent kart on me in this race as well. I wouldn't say it was a total bananas fast rocket like I had in the first race, but it was decent nonetheless. Now, Ollie Flashman getting up the inside because I didn't get the greatest run through the right-left chicane that you saw beforehand, but thankfully managed to squeeze up the inside of him. I like racing Ollie, I've got to say. Really fun racer, actually. Decent guy, and always fair on the circuit. Well, almost always fair. I still remember what happened to Bucknell last year, Ollie. But that's okay. So, back up into 3rd place now with a gap ahead, and knowing that I needed to try and work that down to try and catch up to them. And thankfully, Ollie, who was behind me, played ball here, so I put my finger forwards and I saw him give the thumbs up, so he elected to follow me as we caught up to the back of the guys ahead. And eventually, after 3 laps, caught up to the back of James and Anthony because James started defending, so that helped slow them down and help us get towards them. And I've kind of got onto the back of Anthony on occasion and then had to drop back. Unfortunately, other drivers also finding good pace as well, so that's Rhiannon Percox overtaking. I thought I'd have a go up the inside, but it wasn't quite enough of an overlap, so I really had to get out of that one. But unfortunately, that means that I've lost a lot of momentum going down the straight. Wasn't necessarily defending on the inside there. Yeah, I wasn't. I was just having to follow Rhiannon to try and get a slipstream off her. There's a big drafting effect down that straight at Lydd. I mean, it gets pretty windy at this circuit. You can see from the track furniture. I don't mean the tyres and the cones, I mean like the little banners or whatever they're called. You can see how the wind is coming down the straight there. Now that's Ollie flashing on the outside. Managed to give him space, and I thought I had enough here, but he just cuts across, coming onto the inside of this complex here, which was disappointing, but I've got to give it to him. Great move. And totally 100% clean, so it means that, I mean, I'm okay with that because it means I don't lose that much time. He doesn't lose any time, so it's, well, it's definitely not mutually beneficial because I've lost a position, but in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's a harmless overtake and a really good one on his part. And I've not exactly dropped off the back of them, so I'm still very much in the hunt. I can see that James Wattis has cleared off up ahead, so the battle I'm in is for second place, kind of. Ollie getting a really good run through these corners as well, so managing to overtake Anthony. Little bit of a touch mid-corner, but nothing too malicious. I just gave Ollie a bit of a bump from behind to help him through, and I managed to follow through just about as well, but Anthony didn't give up and stayed on the inside, so I had to run wider to give him room as well. Unfortunately, that means I was really compromised going onto the straight in terms of straight line speed, but thankfully no challenge from any driver behind, and this leads us on to the last lap already. So in 4th place with pretty big gaps to the drivers ahead, so it wasn't realistic to think of gaining a position on the last lap unless someone was going to drop it, which is highly unlikely. I mean, it was pretty perfect conditions on this day, so it would take a massive cock up for someone to drop it in these conditions, really. But I was conscious that I was being followed really closely by Anthony here, and I think, yeah, he just creeps up the inside, so I decided to just back out of that one and not try and hang it around the outside, because I realised what had happened on the previous lap. It had really held him up, and he'd not been able to overtake me on this straight, so I did the opposite, and I pinged it down the inside, and it worked. Unfortunately for Anthony, he didn't give me as much room as I basically required, so he ended up running really wide and losing a fair few positions as it goes, but I was happy to finish 4th. Hugely competitive field, and the lap times are really close around Lydd, so if I have a look at the lap times spread throughout that race, fastest lap was set by Rihanna, which was a 44.1. It's not the quickest of the day by any stretch. I think the quickest of the day was like a 43.7, but still 44.1. My best lap time, 44.3. And that was the general spread between quite a lot of drivers. It was only a few tenths of a second a lap between a lot of drivers here. And I know there's the variance with slipstreams and that, but yeah, it was properly close between generally the whole field at Lydd, and this led to a really exciting day, it has to be said. Now, unfortunately, I was a pleb and I double pressed the record button for the 3rd heat, so I don't have any footage from that. I mean, it's actually kind of nice for me, because then I've got one less race to edit if I'm being completely selfish about it. So, this is the B final. I didn't actually have the greatest day of heats in terms of performance. I had a really good time though, gotta say. A really enjoyable day here. But anyway, starting position of 4th in the B final, which is not too shabby. So, who have we got ahead? We've got Fraser Brunson directly ahead, and on pole, Lloyd McGoik-Williams, with Jason Bradbury next to me, and then shortly behind, Steph Theodoro, Tom Fuller, Reese Pope. Just looking further down the field, it's mostly a spread of Class 2 drivers and a few Class 3s. Not really any Class 1s in this one, except for Jason. So, all to play for here. I was feeling really good heading into this one. I feel like I got my driving together throughout the day, and I was happy with how I was driving. Fraser, unfortunately, not getting the best of starts here, so I already lost a position over the line. As you can see, the driver on my outside, it is outside. That's Steph Theodoro just making a position up there. And making sure that I gave room, but unfortunately, I really bogs down coming out of that corner, so I get mugged up the inside by 1, 2, I think maybe 3 drivers, and well, I suppose it is a little bit of a gripe, but not every kart has a perfect engine, and unfortunately the engine in my kart for this B final was far from perfect, as you will see from what happens on this straight here. So really lost out on this first lap. I don't think I drove badly, I just got unlucky basically, but down from 4th to 10th. So, all to play for through the rest of this race, and knowing that I was going to have somewhat of an uphill battle given the power deficit that I was suffering. The Club 100 guys, I trust they do a really good job, and they have all the right intentions, and they can't have every engine be completely at parity with one another, and it's got to be said that Lydd is definitely the circuit where you notice the difference in kart parity the most when it comes to engine parity anyway, because you've got such long straights and high speed in general. So yeah, unfortunately getting overtaken by Anthony Amato there, so we're down to 11th. It's just making it more of a challenge coming up, but with what's about to happen, driver ahead gets squeezed, so I managed to make up a position because he decided not to yield at that point. So just by keeping out of trouble at this moment, I'm managing to hold on into 10th. Having to defend everywhere because I really was just not picking up speeds coming out of any of these corners in the same way as the karts around me. And I'd rather not be defending because, like I've said earlier, it feels like a momentum circuit, so I'm trying to keep my speed up as much as possible and not compromise my lines by defending everywhere. Now, I made a bit of a mistake going through this left-hand here. If you can see, there's a bump just there in the middle of the circuit. That was really upsetting the balance of the kart, so the double pedalling that I was trying to do through that corner was working out differently at points, but I kept oversteering on the just after that bump on a few occasions, so it compromised me through the corner and onto the straight. And that's Andrea Fioravanti getting back through there. So back down into 11th place, and this is the way that it stayed for quite a few laps, even though drivers ahead were battling and they were costing themselves time, just because I just didn't have the outright pace to catch up with them on merit, I suppose. Even though I was really happy with my driving and I actually closed up to the back of Andrea in quite a few corners, I just couldn't keep up with any of them down the straight, sadly. And that's how it stayed for the next 3 laps, but you can see that the drivers ahead have come a bit closer to me now. I wouldn't say I've caught them up, I would just say they've dropped back towards me. Now, unfortunately, 3 into 1 doesn't go there. I get overtaken on the inside by Hussein, while Anthony Amato's having his own moment. And I managed to overtake Hussein on the outside there, so that was a bit of a funny manoeuvre. I suppose he just backed off going into the corner to make sure he didn't make contact with Anthony. Sent it down the inside, but I saw him coming, so I made the cut back, which worked real nice. Unfortunately, just losing out in a straight line again, so Hussein just waltzes on by. You can tell I'm still a bit disappointed watching this back, but I was driving so well. I was well happy with how I was getting through this race. I just felt it's the only time, actually, in nearly 2 years of doing Club 100, it is the only time where I've thought there's nothing more I can do. I'm just being limited by my kart. So, to be fair, it's a testament to how good the karts are normally. It's just, yep, nothing's perfect. And I maintained 11th for the next, I think it was 6 laps. Now, there's been a bit of shuffling ahead, so Hussein Rashid's made up a further few positions. I think that's Tom Fuller's are actually ahead. Well, it's not anymore. That's Stephen Westwood that got forced off wide there, so picking up his position here. Now, if you watch the orange helmet, that's Hussein. Yeesh. So that was a nasty one. Glad to hear that he was okay after that. You can't really see what happened on camera as it goes, but I guess that someone went to send it up his inside and there was a bit of contact made and it just pushed him out into the wall. But yeah, nasty way to go. So gaining a position out of Hussein's misfortune there, so back up into 9th place, but with the gap to the drivers ahead, I wasn't considering that I was going to gain any more positions unless another bit of clumsy contacts occurred from anyone else, really. So skipping forwards onto the last lap here, because, well, literally nothing of highlights happened in that space of time. For me, I knew that I had Stephen Westwood behind me here, so I could see him coming up the inside, so I just made sure I gave him loads of room to maximise my run through this corner. Now you can see how close I am to the back of him, and how not close I am to the back of him, even though I'm in his toe by the end of this straight. So, good for him that he had a really good kart engine on him here. So he managed to waltz away with 9th place there. I finished on 10th on the road, but I finished 9th post-race because Andrea was a naughty boy. He got 2 ABC takeouts, so he got a black flag exclusion from the race. So yeah, this capped off a disappointing B final, to be honest, but really enjoyed this day. I was well happy with my driving. I had lots of good, clean racing against people, and this is what I come to Club 100 to experience. I'd love to be in the A final, but I'll take a day like this over what happened at Bayford Meadows a few weeks previous. So that wraps up this video, and the following one took place at Wilton Mill, which the edit will be up for that in the not too distant future when I get a chance to do that. I did record all of those races, you'll be pleased to know, so there's no, well, there's a full editing job for me coming up. So if you would like to see more of this kind of stuff, then subscribe to the channel. Like I've said before, there's plenty more videos coming up in the next few weeks because I'm on a bit of a roll at the moment as I have more free time on me. So yeah, I will see you guys again soon for more Club 100 and other bits.